All right, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. Welcome to Live Breathe Film, episode 80. You're here with Corey, Doug, and Murph. I just had to look at the second screen to confirm our names, which is pretty pathetic. But thank you for joining us. Today we're going to dive into the entirety of The Last of Us Season 1, as we're all massive fans of the game. I know it's a couple weeks after the season has ended, but life is busy, so here we are now talking about it. But we know there's plenty of other people who are very passionate about The Last of Us, so hopefully this still entertains people when they catch up to the episode. But before we touch on The Last of Us, let's talk about the current state of our winter and spring box office pool and how all the various films have been performing. Final update, most likely, on Avatar. It has officially reached the seventh biggest film domestically of all time, so it has passed Titanic and Avengers Infinity War. It's still at that third biggest international mark and third biggest worldwide mark. Can't go any higher, but it can potentially go lower because Titanic is getting re-released in China early in April. And while it didn't do gangbusters in the U.S., James Cameron has a massive following in China, and it has not had as many major releases. Titanic has not had as many major releases in China as it has in North America. So, will it be possible that it overtakes Way of Water internationally and worldwide and jumps back and forth again? It's possible. It'll be interesting to see. But let's dive into the films of the winter and spring that are in our pool. Doug absolutely demolishing the competition with $469 million. Dude, you're killing it. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, shit movie, but it's still made over $200 million. It's looking like it'll make right around what Ant-Man and the Wasp made. Creed 3, blowing up. It actually moved back up to, I think it, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have bounced up, unless I'm looking at the final, or the estimates or the final numbers, but I think it bounced back up to number 2 this past weekend. I can't trust Box Office Mojo anymore, so it's either that 2 or 4, but either way, it's been holding strongly. It's got $140 million. Definitely going to go above 150. So the lack of Sylvester Stallone did actually help this movie, and then bringing in a new villain like Jonathan Majors as the antagonist certainly helped out. Scream 6 right now, that's right around topping Scream 3 at the box office. Looks like it probably will top Scream 1 and 2 to be the biggest film in the franchise. Obviously not adjusted for inflation. And then even 65, you had that, and that movie even is making like close to $30 million. I thought that Dumpster Fire was going to like max out at like 15 total.
Yeah, I didn't think that was going to do shit.
But despite all the competition in theaters, it's still making some money.
People like dinosaurs and they like Adam Driver, so if you put those things together...
Oh, that's it.
Well,
okay.
All dinosaurs are definitely in. They always are.
All right. And then you've got Dungeons and Dragons coming this weekend. It's looking to make like 30, I think, 30 to 40 projected in North America this coming weekend.
I think it will go above that.
Okay. Strong words. But
here first.
I mean, based on the reviews, a lot of movies that have been getting strong reviews lately have been going higher than their tracking has estimated.
I mean, almost like Creed, everything that's come out recently has gone higher.
Yeah, Creed, Scream, John Wick. All went higher. It's the movies that got bad reviews that went below. Which, yeah, we'll get into my movies. I'm currently in second place with 199.
Segue.
Shazam fucking bombed real hard. It was my number 2 pick or number 1 pick. I went back to back with that and John Wick. think I took John Wick first. I hope. I'll say I took John Wick first to make myself feel better.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because they're both not going to lead me to victory. I'm having my first loss in the box office pool, thanks to a horrific draft, but mostly thanks to Shazam just absolutely crashing and burning. I mean, right now it has $45 million after 2 weekends. Just a pitiful total. The DCEU is ending on a very sour note.
Wonder how quickly that'll be on digital.
I would imagine pretty fast. Black Adam was out very fast. So I would expect the same for Shazam. What I don't understand is the Shazam reviews and how poor they were, because the movie was just as good, if not better than the first. And we've been talking recently in text and stuff. It seems like there's just general superhero like backlash from critics. This had, I think, the highest audience score for the director and his lowest critical score, including Shazam 1, among the other 2 movies that he's previously directed. So it's not really lining up. I thought the film was one of the better DCEU films. I think I put it in like my top 5 or 6. So yeah, I just don't get it.
Yeah, it seems like movies have to either, if they have to be amazing, or like they have to be like really up there on the high end in order to like pull together a good review at this point. Like I think if it's just good, it's like not good enough.
For sure. Agreed. And then as far as audiences, I don't know how much this has to do with just general people being aware that these movies don't actually matter this year from DC because everything's being rebooted, or if people didn't like Shazam as much as it seemed, or if the marketing was poor. But I mean, we're looking at like this movie dropping practically like 80 million total from the first one.
I don't think the marketing was great either.
Yeah, it could have been the marketing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it didn't pull in the family audiences. Didn't really pull in the comic book audiences. So it's just a disappointment all around. But John Wick Chapter 4 did gangbusters this weekend. A nice $74 million opening weekend. This franchise is just absurd in how each movie gets better reviews, it gets better fan responses, and it has bigger box office grosses 4 times in a row. It's unlike anything I think I've seen in my lifetime, and such an anomaly in both like box office and critical and audience response for a film series. But yeah, Corey and I saw it over the weekend. I would say it's probably the best in the series.
I would agree.
So yeah, we're doing some. I guess we'll do some very mini reviews right now. But I would say John Wick was the best of the series. Shazam, I enjoyed more than the first one. Scream, middle of the pack, leaning towards the better entries. Quantumania, I thought was the worst in the series and the worst in the entire MCU.
You
like Thor so much?
You like Thor: Love and Thunder more?
Yes, zero doubt about it. Thor was not. Thor: Love and Thunder is towards the bottom. Like I would put it in the bottom 5 of the MCU.
Yeah.
But there were still more that I enjoyed than didn't enjoy. Quantumania, I just felt bored. I was bored. The only things I enjoyed were when they were not in the quantum realm, which was about 10 minutes of the entire movie, 15 minutes of the entire movie, and Jonathan Majors related stuff. And with everything going on with Jonathan Majors right now, who knows what is going to go on with his future in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And then Creed 3 I thought was closer in quality to Creed than Creed 2. I thought it was one of the better entries in the whole Rocky Creed universe. So a bunch of mini reviews. Oh, and I saw the movie Champions. That one was an enjoyable movie as well. It was one that I drafted. Didn't do well, just like most of my movies. But it was a fun little movie from one of the Farley brothers, and Woody Harrelson was solid in it. Yeah, that's me. I'm gonna end up in last place. Corey, you're currently in last place with 115 million. But you are going to rise like a phoenix next weekend when the Super Mario Brothers movie comes out and absolutely dominates. You also have Air coming out the same day, which I think can do pretty well for an adult skewing movie. And then you have Beau is Afraid eventually, which is an Ari Aster movie, so it'll probably make $30 million. Yeah, but
I think this one
$30 million is $30 million.
Yeah, but you have to remember it also has, an actor that is pretty big right now. So I think it could bring in a little bit more money because Joaquin Phoenix is in it. We'll see.
No,
I get what you're saying, but Joaquin Phoenix is not a box office draw. He was the Joker, so the Joker made a ton of money, but otherwise only major cinephiles go to the movies for Joaquin Phoenix. And only major cinephiles are going to see Beau is Afraid and lovers of A24 and Ari Aster. But that 30, 40 million, that's not bad. That's better than a bunch of
I'm going to predict 60.
Okay.
60 million.
You made 60 million from Cocaine Bear. That movie is
I did not think I was going to make 60 million for that.
Currently your number one movie. Didn't see that one coming.
No.
Movie since our last episode, you had 2 movies come out. They made 3 million combined. Moving On with Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda, and A Good Person with Florence Pugh and Morgan Freeman. Knock at the Cabin. We talked about how that was a box office disappointment, despite it being one of Shyamalan's better movies.
So weird. And
the Titanic re-release didn't do much of anything. But yeah, Cocaine Bear. That's your biggie so far. But yeah, Doug, you have a $350 million head start right now on Corey. Super Mario Brothers is absolutely going to exceed 350 million. But you still have Dungeons and Dragons. You still got money coming in from Creed 3 and Scream 6.
I need Dungeons and Dragons to get me like at least 100 million.
Yes, yeah, I would say you do, because you also have Renfield, The Covenant, and Somewhere in Queens. Is Somewhere in Queens the Sebastian Maniscalco movie?
I don't even remember.
I don't know.
No,
it's not. I would just assume that those 3 movies.
It is, but I don't think it is. It's not the Sebastian Maniscalco movie I was thinking of. Yeah, that's probably a $1 million movie if I had to guess. The Covenant might make some money. Guy Ritchie, Renfield, I think will bomb, but maybe it'll make some money. But yeah, you got Dungeons and Dragons, which could end up being like $100 million movie. So yeah, it's gonna be a real close one between the two of you. I'm excited to see how this one pans out, and who I'm going to be sending $25 to come May. But anything else box office wise or about any of these movies?
I saw the runtime for Mario, which I was pretty shocked. I thought it was going to be closer to like 80 minutes, and it's like 90, 95, which I was kind of... It's like over an hour and a half, or like, just at an hour and a half.
Gotcha. I thought you were gonna like come out of somewhere with like it's a 2 hour plus like epic.
It's like Avatar for Way of Water. It's like 3 hours and 12 minutes.
That would be bad.
That would be bad.
Then I would start worrying about Mario.
Yeah, I'd be like
2.5 hours, 3 hours.
I'm definitely losing this.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting.
Yeah, it's a good
Kids
line.
can't pay attention for that long.
Exactly. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how things shake up over the next 2 weeks. I imagine we'll have another episode in the next week or two, so we'll talk about things more then. But I guess let's just get ready to our feature presentation, and that's talking about The Last of Us Season 1. So Season 1 adapted the entirety of The Last of Us video game, now known as The Last of Us Part 1. And it also included all of the downloadable story content, the Left Behind chapter that came out within a year of The Last of Us video game. It's in 2013 and 2014, respectively. Let's, I guess, dive into overall thoughts on the show, the casting, anything that you think that the game did better than the TV show and vice versa. And then we'll go major spoiler alert territory and start talking about our expectations for adapting The Last of Us Part 2, which we know will be taking place over multiple seasons of the television show.
I think
so. Let you.
No, I was just going to say that I think the two best things for me from the season were actually the casting. I don't think there was anyone that I really had an issue with casting wise. I enjoyed everyone. And then the pacing, for the most part, for how short the season was, I mean, I thought that the pacing of each episode was done very well. So I just wanted to point that out initially. That was definitely like one of the highlights or two of the highlights for me. Because going into it, knowing that it was 9 episodes, I was like, it's kind of an issue, but they made it work. And it seemed, for the most part, I thought it was satisfying. It hit all the right notes for me.
Doug, you want to say
I guess
something?
if we're talking about casting, I think overall I would agree the casting was good. Pedro Pascal as Joel was a good choice. Bella Ramsey, I thought, was a good Ellie, although a different Ellie.
They casted Ellie as if they
Pedro
had.
Pascal Joel was.
Finish your thought about Pedro Pascal, and then we'll talk about.
I was just gonna say Pedro Pascal just seemed like closer to Joel. The Joel we knew, he wasn't. He was definitely different. But Bella Ramsey's Ellie felt much different.
Agreed. I think they cast like Bella Ramsey, and the writing for her character was based on the fact that they already knew where Part 2 was going.
Yeah,
and they leaned more into that type of like how she would get from where she was in Part 1 to where she was in Part 2. Still very different, even than Ellie's performance, Ashley Johnson's performance in the video games. And we'll talk about Ashley Johnson more on the show in a bit. But yes, she's very different from the Ellie of the video games. And I thought
it wasn't bad.
It worked for the TV show.
I didn't dislike it.
Yeah, I thought she was great. And I didn't I'm cool with them being two distinct versions of Ellie, one for the video game and one for the television show.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I don't know if it's casting. I think it's more like that, like Kansas City character is still like Kathleen or whatever the hell her name was. That character, like, that's probably like, I don't know if it was a casting issue or it was a character issue, but like I hate that performance, or I hated that character. I don't know if it was the performance or not.
I think we didn't get enough time with that character. I think that's my opinion on why that episode just kind of didn't work. I think it would have worked better if they fleshed out that character a little bit more.
Yeah,
Didn't give enough time.
for the most part, I like the additions. Like one of the highlights for the show for me was the things that they added to the story that weren't in the video game. But that was the one departure that didn't work for me. It took up a large chunk of the season, and I think pacing overall was an issue of the show, and how the first 5 episodes felt like it was so much of the beginning of the video game, and then it rushed through the remainder of the video game, especially when you consider the fact that one episode was the downloadable content. You essentially had 3 hours that covered well over
One
half of
episode
the
was
game.
Another episode was basically the Bill and Frank story, which was, like a highlight for me of the show, but that's another hour that's gone of the video game.
Yes, and that also counters my argument about so much of the video game being about, or so much of the first half of the story being about early parts of the game, because that was something that wasn't even in the game. Also, the whole Kathleen story was something that was not in the video game.
There's no part of me that says get out, but I think like you lost time to tell the story you were trying to tell, so like there should be more time to I think it just should have been longer, more episodes.
Yeah, I think we ultimately wanted more of Joel and Ellie. Like all of us were in agreement on that. But even the non-video game, like the non-gamers who watch the show, like they got the Joel and Ellie relationship with the amount of time that was spent with them. And I haven't really heard complaints from that side from those types of people, whether it be people that I personally know or from television critics.
I think a lot of it.
I think it has more to do with our relationships with those characters and how much more time you spent with them in the game, because you are with them the entire time in the game, versus the show where it followed different characters. Like it felt like every episode had a very special guest that you were following, whether it be David in episode 8, Riley in episode 7. Bill and Frank in episode 3, Kathleen and Sam and Sam's brother's name is escaping me at the moment in episodes 4 and 5. But it was very much interested in not just telling Joel and Ellie's story, but also the other random people who were both in the video game and not in the video game.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of complaints either from people that haven't played the game. I mean, I think the difference is we know that the game made us feel that relationship more than the show did.
Yeah.
And so you're just going in with that.
I think that's
knowledge.
a hard thing to overcome, because as someone who plays, if you played the game, you're spending 20 hours with these characters. I think for that game, it's around that, maybe a little bit more. So to try to, change and, migrate that type of relationship and experience into a 9-hour show is going to be difficult. I don't think it's even possible, but I think it got close for me, at least. Like it had the gist.
I mean, but like Murph just said, so much of those 9 hours were spent not with Joel.
Should have been longer. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm critiquing, so obviously these are nitpicks or things I didn't like. There's a bunch of things I did like about this show, but that was one thing that I wish I had a little bit more time, even if it was just like one more episode that focused a little bit more on Joel and Ellie.
Do you think that HBO gave them like a lot of time, like episode count, amount of episodes to actually make it work? Or do you think they ultimately, knew how many episodes they were going to do from the beginning and they just decided on 9? Or maybe they had 10 and they decided on 9 by combining things, what have you.
Well, we know they had 10, and he
Yeah.
had them combine the first 2 episodes, which is how we wound up with 9.
Yeah.
Which those
I
first
don't
2
know,
episodes would have been super short if that was the case, because it wasn't like it was a mega supersized episode. It was only 75 minutes.
Yeah, it was. It was 75 or 80 minutes, I think.
They were ran through episodes.
Yeah.
The finale was a little over 40 minutes. They didn't. It seems like they told the story they wanted to tell in the time frame that they wanted to tell it. And didn't overstay their welcome, even though they very well could have and probably should have in certain areas, based on the game. But yeah, casting, definitely the highlight for me. Both Pedro and Bella. I also, for the most part, liked all the casting of the characters outside of our 2 leads. Highlights for me being Bill and Frank. And Bill was someone I was originally annoyed about, because I was hoping W. Earl Brown would have reprised his role, because he's like a legit actor. One of the bigger names that was in the game. But the way they told this story, it definitely worked better with Nick Offerman. Maybe they can get him as a different character in part 2, because they did a great job of recasting characters from the video game as different characters on the TV show. Believe Marlene, the actress who played Marlene, was the only exception of somebody who reprised their actual character. But I mean, we got Ashley Johnson, who I alluded to earlier, getting to play Ellie's mom, telling that story and finding out how Ellie was immune to the virus. That was fantastic, and seeing her as Ellie's mom was just so cool, because like I was hearing Ellie's voice like from the game, but she also kind of looks somewhat like Bella Ramsey, more than she looks like Ellie in the video game. So it was a really neat combination. And then we had
the actor who played
too.
The actor who played Joel's brother. in the game.
Jeffrey Pierce, is that his
Jeffrey
name?
Pierce, yeah, he was in the Kansas City.
Tommy. He was Kathleen's buddy, and then David's buddy was played by
Troy
Baker, Joel from the video game. So Ellie got to kill Joel. With a fucking huge knife.
He got a great death too. Like that was
an iconic death. That whole sequence was a major highlight of the season. But yeah, I think the casting overall was great. Some of the different creative decisions they made, making Sam deaf, I thought was one of the smarter decisions that they made from the game. He wasn't deaf in the game, and I thought it added a lot to the character and the brother dynamic, and even the dynamic between Ellie and Sam in the game, or in the television show. Sorry. And what is Sam's brother's name that I'm struggling with?
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Henry. The actor who played Henry was great as well. I mean, that was one of the most emotional things of the game for me, their whole story, and I thought it played out wonderfully. I think one of the other highlights for me was the fact that like all the major emotional things, like pieces of the game, they translated perfectly onto the show, whether it be Sarah's death, Sam and Henry's deaths. What are some other ones?
The argument with Joel.
Yes,
and Joel.
Definitely.
That was a big one.
Did Joel and Tommy have that huge speech, or did Joel have that huge speech to Tommy in the game?
He did, but it didn't. It took place at a different at the dam.
Okay, it just it hit better for me on the TV show than the game.
Yeah, they just changed the location, but like that.
Everything about that episode, that Kin episode, episode 6, was better than the portion in the game, and it was also something where, having known what was going on in part 2, they were able to start easing us into part 2 by changing the setting, since the setting of Jackson, Wyoming plays a big part in The Last of Us Part 2.
Well, if you listen to the podcast, Murph, you would know that the game was originally that scene was originally intended to take place in Jackson. They ran out of like time and money to have it take place in Jackson. That's why they stuck it in the dam in the game.
Interesting.
There was artwork and design was all like.
Oh, you're saying in the video game they couldn't do Jackson?
Yeah, they ran out of money.
Yeah, in the video game, like the intent was always to go into Jackson, and like they had pictures and storyboard and everything for Jackson, and they just like ran out of like time and to make it happen, so they just stuck it in the dam.
Oh, all right.
But like
one of the actual
it was more of
pieces of insight from the podcast that I didn't hear. Yeah, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, so that was like the true vision of what they intended, or Druckmann intended.
It worked out because it played a hell of a lot better than that damn sequence. That was probably the worst sequence of the video game.
Yeah, I agree. But even like the performances for those scenes, in a lot of there were some where they translated them and hit the necessary beats. But then there were some, specifically the argument with Joel, where it was basically taken like right out of the game, which I thought was really neat. It was cool how they decided to do that. Like there were some situations where I guess they were like, this plays better, this works better, and then they just went with their instincts on a lot of things. And if something just worked really well in the game, they just went for it and just, cut and pasted it the best way possible.
There were definitely certain moments they knew they couldn't fuck with, and that was one of them. Riley and Ellie's final conversation in Left Behind. Minus, I don't think Ellie had the temper tantrum that she had in the game, but then everything after she sat down was basically like copy and paste dialogue from the video game.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Because they made Ellie get angry in this television show in comparison to the game, which alludes to the Ellie of The Last of Us Part 2. And then that final episode, they just knocked that out of the park. Everything in Salt Lake City. What were your thoughts on the finale?
Doug?
I would say the Ashley Johnson scene I thought was really awesome. Probably like one of the highlights of the show. I thought she crushed it, and just like being in this like very emotional scene of giving birth, thing like what's her name, Anna or something in the game?
Anna.
But yeah, knowing that like she gave birth to her daughter, but she's now been bitten by an infected and isn't going to live to like see her daughter grow up. I thought it was a really like well done emotional scene. I thought Johnson crushed it. I thought it got a lot of the beats right of Salt Lake City. Like the giraffe scene, I thought was pretty well done. Felt a lot like the kind of went down like the game did. This is a episode that I thought could have been stretched a little bit more, leading up to like the big.
It was too short.
Could have had some infected.
Yeah. Could have had some infected. The only time we got the infected was during that Ashley Johnson scene. It was one.
I think that was due to it was probably too expensive. I think that's why. It's my theory. That's why they didn't use him as much as they wanted to.
I don't know. I heard Druckmann say that he's gonna have a ton of they're gonna go like crazy with Infected in part 2. So I don't know if that's because they just got like a bunch more money from HBO.
We'll see. We'll see what his idea of
They heard a lot of
is.
they're hearing the criticism about the lack of clickers in the show, and they're
they designed
really
such great fucking characters, like the models and everything. The art was perfect, and then you use them so sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
Clickers being the biggest.
It was
the best ones that they did. And we got like 2 scenes with them.
It didn't, and maybe this was part of like what the show was trying to get at, but it didn't seem like it was like when you play the game, like it feels like it truly is like an impossibility to get from Boston to Salt Lake City. Like it feels like like they had to survive crazy odds. Whereas this, it felt like doable. Like it felt like someone could pull it off because there wasn't like really any real threats outside of like steered away from Kansas City.
Well, and they made so much progress.
There really
every
wasn't
episode.
Yeah, every episode they were like
infected,
hundreds of miles away. I mean, one time they're just like, 3 months later, which is fine. But I mean, it also would have been cool to see their interactions during those 3 months because the relationship would grow a significant amount during it, and especially right after the trauma that
you want to know what
they just went through.
Mm-hmm.
What
you want to know? It could have really worked well for the 3 months. That would have like probably budget wise not cost them a ton, but made us really feel like they had to
a montage.
That's all we needed was a montage. We just needed seeing Ellie get better at like taking down Infected and
like
stuff.
Eye of the Tiger.
Just watching them kind of like grow.
Yeah.
Her doing her running upstairs. Yeah. But yeah, I think they could have taken a cue from Rocky IV, done a montage.
It only takes a couple minutes. You just got to take like 4 or 5 minutes, and it helps so much.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty quick to film probably, and it wouldn't. You could just reuse the same freaking people over and over again, and just put them in different clothes. Call it a day. But yeah, that probably would have then we would have been like, oh yeah, like we didn't see them like fighting these clickers and Infected, but like it happened. Like we know it happened, and the show acknowledged that it happened.
If I had to guess, I don't think it was a money thing. I think it was we don't want to be compared to Walking Dead thing.
It's a good point.
And now that they have gotten past that point, they can dive deeper into the Infected and not have to worry about those Walking Dead comparisons. Granted, when we talk about The Last of Us Part 2, we are going to have a very major Walking Dead type situation that I am worried about for the success of the show. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But yeah, that is what I think. Because their Walking Dead comparisons were happening no matter what. But there would have been a lot more of them if there were regular appearances of Infected. Because they were only in 4 episodes of the 4 or 5 episodes of the 9?
I mean,
yeah. Maybe,
I'd say 4.
Or like if they did have an appearance, it was like a real fucking brief one.
Yeah, they did a montage where they showed up in the Bill and Frank episode.
Yeah, and like Ellie stabs at one that was practically dying in the head in that same episode, and like that was it for that one.
I don't
think there were any in the first Kansas City one. They saved the big moment for the second part.
Left Behind. We got a moment.
Tess, when Tess dies, and the clicker episode. Or is that the same episode?
That was the same episode. Those are both episode 2.
It's the same episode.
so 4.
Yeah.
The last episode we had the one with the Ashley Johnson flashback.
We had none in the second to last episode because that was just focusing on the evil of man.
Mm-hmm. Evil David.
So maybe it was 1/3 of the episodes didn't have any. But there was 1/3 of the episodes where there were barely any. It was really just like the show-stopping moments were the premiere, the second episode, and the 5th episode.
It was kind of weird because it felt like they were setting up, like when at the very beginning it felt like they were setting up like these infected are going to be like a huge threat, and they even like set up like the network that exists that they added from the game, and then none of it came into play. So I'm assuming they're just gonna have to put it in the next couple of seasons, or it's gonna seem like stupid that they created this network concept and used it once.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about the ending. Obviously, we've known the ending since 2013. What are your thoughts? Where do your sympathies lie?
I mean, ultimately, I think I probably would have made the same decision that Joel made. Being honest, just being in that moment, I think. But the one thing I probably wouldn't have done is I wouldn't have lied. I wouldn't have lied about, what he lied about. I would have told the truth.
Okay. Doug?
I don't know. It's hard to put yourself in that scenario.
Yeah.
Another like podcast thing I think I mentioned to you guys, but it's interesting, and it seems to have panned out for the people that I know that have watched the show that I've asked the question to. But Druckmann said when they screen tested the ending of it, it was people were generally 50-50 unless they were a parent, and then they 100% sided with Joel. And so
yeah, that's interesting you say that.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's
obviously,
it seems like that, like parents, like just, you feel like, I guess that's what that thing was trying to point out, or what the thesis of the thing is like when you're a parent, like you have this unconditional love over this person that fuck everything else, like protect this.
Yeah. I think you have a certain audience that are just Joel apologists who will forgive anything he does. Doesn't matter like how they've established the fact that he's not a good person, or he's done a lot of bad things, but they can forgive and forget because A, he was the character you played as in the video game, and B, Pedro Pascal is so damn likable. Then you have the parents who are like, I'll do anything to protect my kid. And then you have the more, I guess, the people that are more based in, or are more unattached and are like, no, what he did, he just fucking doomed the rest of the world for his own selfish purposes.
More like logical type of.
Definitely more logical. Ultimately, nobody was doing the right thing in that scenario. Marlene shouldn't have fucking put Ellie under without talking to her about what she was going through. Should have let Joel and Ellie have her goodbye. If they did, maybe Joel wouldn't have done what he did. If he had heard Ellie say, this is what I want, like, there's a clear understanding. So Marlene was wrong in that way. Joel is wrong in executing everybody the way he did and dooming the fate of a world that, I mean, they made a valid point in the 9 episodes. Does the world really deserve saving? While there were some good, like very good people still in the world, there are also a lot of horrible people in the world, which is true to the world now, like as it is in a non-post-apocalyptic
And there weren't that many infected
and
anyway.
yeah, there seemingly were 5 infected people in all of America. So, with the exception of the underground of Kansas City. Unless you're in a quarantine zone, there's no infected yet you have to deal with. So just don't be in a QZ and be in a commune, and basically the world's perfect.
It ultimately shows one of the best things I think about that story is that, no one, I'm not going to say no one, very few people that you encounter in that game or in that story are actually good people. Very few.
Yes.
Most of the people are very gray or, just garbage. And like you said, Joel is not a good person. He's not. Like, I wouldn't even say he's a hero in a lot of ways. He's just as bad as a lot of the characters that you come across in that game. It's just you're playing as him. Or
you don't have the perspective of the people that he's killing, who have their own lives and agendas.
Exactly. Which I find really fascinating about the whole thing, So.
But yeah, I get why Joel did what he did. If I was in the situation, I would have selfishly done what Joel did as well, I imagine. Would I have lied? Probably. Because I would have come up with a better lie than he did.
It was so bad. It's a terrible lie.
A terrible fucking lie.
She knew immediately. This motherfucker's lying to me.
The relationships is doomed if she finds out the truth. Either you tell the truth immediately and hope for the best, or you come up with a better lie. Joel handled it as poorly as one could possibly handle the situation.
What was his? What did he say again? I always forget.
The Raiders came in. But at the same time, there was also plenty of people that they tried to test on, and they were immune, and it didn't work. So I got you out of there, and I couldn't get your clothes because the Raiders.
So he doesn't say that in the game.
The Raider part, he doesn't. He says more like they
couldn't help you, right? Or they couldn't. You couldn't. They tried.
Couldn't help you.
Work. There were already people that they had that were immune, and it just didn't work. So we left. It's just
in his defense, he did.
Raider thing is at least a better lie.
He needed a story for why he didn't take her clothes. So yes, the Raider story works somewhat for that, but too many coincidences that aren't helping him out.
No.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job of when Joel is killing people, you're not supposed to be oh, this is great, go get him, Joel. You're supposed to be this doesn't feel I'm not super comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't think the way they played it, you're not. I think most people aren't cheering him on, or if they were him on, it slowly fades as you realize he's just fucking in the game?
Executing people. Are you talking about in the game or the television show?
The television show.
Because in the game you're fuck yeah, let's say Ellie.
Yeah.
But yes, the TV show made it oh man, it's fucked up what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's killing doctors.
Yeah, you're definitely just oh.
Yeah, he's killing people that have surrendered. And even in the episode prior, he has people tied up, and he's torturing and executing them. Granted, they were. Where they were working with somebody who was an absolute.
You had to.
You needed a pipe scene. You needed a pipe scene.
Yep.
Since it is a weapon you use so many times in the game.
And I just love that line where he's it's okay, I believe him.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
That's that's such a good scene in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They had to do it.
He has his moments where he's the old sniper, he was going to let go.
That's true.
It sort of depends on the moment that he's in and where his head's at. Right then, his head was, I need to save Ellie as quickly as humanly possible. fuck you. Boom. But yeah, their relationship has some can be fraught because you can tell that Ellie, while she says okay, like I believe you, doesn't seem like she really does believe him. She's a smart girl.
She's sus.
Yeah. Um, she can smell bullshit. It doesn't help that he had just given her his speech, which wasn't in the video game, about and made things less ambiguous about why he saved her. About like you're the reason like why I've gotten better. Like it wasn't time that healed all wounds. It was like you are the reason why I am not like just like crawling through life miserable. Which also gives away like okay, maybe this guy did not do something he was supposed to do, and that's why I'm waking up from amnesia, not amnesia, from anesthetics in a hospital gown in the backseat of this truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But any other, as far as Last of Us Part 1, any other things or highlights for you? Highlights or lowlights?
One thing that I actually really liked as an addition was the anxiety, hook that they added in, sprinkled in throughout the season. I thought that was a really good choice. That added to a lot of Joel's,
making Joel like sort of seem weaker and
yeah, and showing like he is human and like he's going through some issues because of what has happened, and now we're being triggered by Ellie's existence as a whole.
Yeah,
I thought that was really, really cool and really smart for them to do that, because that a lot of that I feel like comes across when you're playing the game just naturally, like because you're spending so much time with these characters that you kind of formulate your own experiences, in a way. And they were trying to figure out a way to kind of convey that, and I think that was one of the ways that they came up with. And I thought that was really, really neat.
Yeah, another for me were the cold opens that very much seemed based in science in the first two episodes. Very Chernobyl. Were both not in the game. Yeah, very Chernobyl vibes. Those are two of my favorite scenes on the show. And again, we talked about the cold open with Ashley Johnson in the finale. The three cold opens were three of the best scenes of the show.
They better continue.
All original stuff.
Yeah.
When they kept us on our toes with original shit for the most part, it was fantastic. Kansas City was the outlier, the only outlier, I would say.
I still believe that would have worked better if it was one episode. I think it would have played better.
One longer episode, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it was an HBO decision. They wanted it split for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been if they kept it this exact same length, it would have been a monster very long episode.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Definitely could have been an HBO decision, or it could have been theirs and not a cliffhanger. But it was the only one that felt like a part one of two, and like type of episode, and sucked because you had to wait. Like it felt like you had to wait a week. Like I mean, you did have to wait a week. It felt like a Netflix type of show, like where you should have just been able to go to the next episode immediately. The only other cliffhanger we really had was Joel's getting stabbed and then finding out his fate. And they didn't even make us wait a full week because you saw in Left Behind, like they cut between present and Ellie's past, which worked for telling that story. But yeah, those were the only two things that you could say were that one. I guess that one maybe I would say didn't really feel like a cliffhanger to me. Maybe because I know what happened. But the end of Kansas City Part 1, that felt like a cliffhanger. But yeah, anything else, Doug?
I was just gonna say, just something that I thought was funny. Did you see the internet blow up about like the shadow with the shadowed figure with like the braided hair, and they were like, "That's a character from part 2. Like, it's her. She's in this episode," and all the internet was like freaking out about it. And then I think like Druckmann at some point had to be like, "Yeah, no, like that's not what that was." But like,
no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, the only thing I heard about was, the Easter egg.
I'm guessing. Where was it in Salt Lake City?
it was during the shooting scene. There's a figure that is running. You can't make them out, but you can see like
But people are thinking
it was a female with like
Okay.
it looked like you can kind of see like a
Yeah.
I get
and
what you're saying.
He actually Joel doesn't shoot that person. Like that's one of the people that like got away.
Gotcha.
It seemed like, and so yeah, the internet was like going crazy and like lightening up the picture and like like doing all the things that they do. And
Druckmann said no.
He was like, they were like talking about it on like one of the podcasts I listened to, and Druckmann's like, yeah, I can dispel that right now. Like that's not what that was. But
Interesting.
yeah, people were like going crazy about that.
All right.
But yeah, overall it was good. It was pretty faithful to the game, I thought, and had a lot of fan service in it, but not enough that it was, or not too much.
No.
So I thought they walked that line well, and that Bill and Frank episode is like, for me, it was like such a great episode of television.
Yeah, again, something like they changed the story completely from the game, and it worked so much better than in the game. It wouldn't have worked in the game, but it worked
Oh no, not at all.
in the medium of television.
I can't even imagine that playthrough.
Yeah.
It would be so boring.
Like that.
You got like, you play as Frank, you got to clean the house up and like tend to the garden.
Pour some wine. But yeah, I mean that's the difference between video games and television.
Special effects are one thing I wanted to call out. The special effects that they did were fantastic. I loved how they did a lot of the cityscapes, and when Joel and Ellie and Tess, when they were navigating through the different cities, I thought that was really well done, because how the hell else are you supposed to do that, without doing like some sort of a set? So the combination of like practical effects and like using like soundstage and stuff with the the computer graphics, I thought was done really well, especially with the giraffe, which I thought they nailed that, because they used a real giraffe, and then painted everything else in, which was just awesome.
Also, a cool little Easter egg was Laura Bailey being in the
Yep. In the end,
operating room.
Mm-hmm.
As one of like
reprising her,
one of the nurses.
Yeah, reprising her voice. So she was the other one that played the same character that she played in the game.
Yeah.
Because she voiced one of the nurses.
She voiced one of the nurses.
Oh, she did, and then and then she was Abby in the second game.
Yeah.
Because
it was just like kind of weird. That group
I had no idea.
That group of like actors, like Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, Laura Bailey, they're all like they're very good friends. So she probably came on to just do that, and then it ended up leading to her being in 2. I don't think she did any. Maybe she did some other stuff in the first one, but yeah, she voiced one of the nurses in that room.
Yeah, I'm seeing in Last of Us she was a news reporter and various. So I guess that was one of her various categories.
Yeah, Druckmann was saying like she reprised one of her role as one of the nurses.
Huh.
It'll be interesting to see what because I'm sure she's going to have like an actual role in the next season or the one after that. It'll be interesting to see like what they do with her.
All right.
I think Druckmann already confirmed like that wasn't it for her.
Yeah.
Like she'll get like a meaty role like everybody else.
Well, after the finale, we found out we already knew after like episode 1 or 2, the show got renewed. After the finale, we found out they're definitely splitting up The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, into multiple seasons. They haven't confirmed yet whether that means 2 seasons or 3 seasons. It's a massive story. It is not linear the way that The Last of Us is, that The Last of Us Part 1 is. Let's get spoiler territory here. If you have not played The Last of Us Part 2 and you did not want to know anything about it, tune out now. Corey, throw some warning up on everything, because I'd be fucking furious if I found out what happened. Granted, these are 3-year-old spoilers at this point, because the game came out in 2020. But yeah, we're gonna be talking about some big things and how we think it's going to be, how the game will be adapted, and how it will ultimately work as a television show, because it is going to be much more difficult to adapt than The Last of Us Part 1, which I think it's safe to say is the best video game adaptation of all time, whether becoming a movie or a TV show after the fact. All right, Last of Us Part 2. Where do we want to start? How do we think that we're going to go about adapting this game into a television show? Because it does not lend itself very gracefully to become a television show.
Yeah,
I mean, your summary before just now was perfect. The game is non-linear. Bleh, can't speak. So it's going to be really difficult for them to tell the story, and I don't think it's going to be told in the same exact way because of that. Because they can't. It's just, I don't think it'll work for this medium. I imagine it'll be I think 2 seasons. I don't know. I think 3 might be too much.
I think 3 might be too much also.
But it depends on the original content. If they go crazy with original stuff, like they showed in the first season that they can do original stuff and it worked really well and it feel organic. So maybe they do a lot more of that with, adapting the second game. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously what's tough about it is we've got essentially 2 main characters with Ellie and Abby.
Allie?
Allie?
And the non-linear piece of it is you play the first half of the game, or a big chunk of the first half of the game, as Ellie, and then you just completely switch perspective, go back in time, and basically replay the first half of the game, but from Abby's perspective. And it goes a little bit earlier, I think. Doesn't it start earlier than when Ellie's story picks up?
It starts a little bit earlier, leading up to.
It leads up to what the big crux of the movie. So anyway, obviously for a TV show, you can't. In my opinion, you can't be like, oh, we're going to do like this whole season of television with this Ellie person that you've now like grown attached to. And then we're just going to like toss this character to the side for like basically a whole nother season and have this brand new character that you're going to follow. Like that's not going to work.
Have they ever done anything like that in
I don't
TV
even
before?
think it worked that well in the game, if I'm being honest. Because they did it at a point where I really wanted to see what was happening in Ellie's story.
That was the point.
I know it was the point, but it didn't. I don't think it worked that well, is what I'm saying. Abby's story was told well, but they did it at a point where I was so like, all right, is it going to go fucking on forever and ever? And yes, it will go on forever and ever. You're going like 8 hours before you get back to Ellie, and they did it right at that fucking cliffhanger moment. I don't know if audience will have the patience for that. You might have to go back and forth between Ellie and Abby's story.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think there's no.
Yeah, I think you have.
There's no option to do it. To do it like the way the game did it, because it's one thing the game can like force you to play as this other character, and you know like you're interested in. I don't know, like from a game perspective, like yeah, I can deal with it, and I can just now be this brand new character, but I don't think audiences would deal with it, and I think they'd probably be pissed off.
Yeah, and like I'm not saying The Last of Us is a bad game or anything at all, but it was very frustrating having to wait the amount of time from when you switch from Ellie and then when you get back to her story.
Well, you were angry because you're
it
like, why
pays
the fuck am
off
I
when
playing
you
against
eventually
this
get
person?
back. Yeah, and then like when you realize, oh shit, it's really gonna go day by day. Like I thought at first like it was gonna be like 2 hours, like one day or something. But then it was like, no, this is gonna be like a full length video game before we get back to like where we were in the story, like the present day.
And then you still had a whole nother like 6 hours, 7 hours until the end of the game.
Yeah, maybe? Like the epilogue is like a whole other fucking game, if you could even call it an epilogue. I think the epilogue is probably like the second time you're running through as Ellie. Because doesn't she go back to the farm like multiple times?
Multiple times, yes.
Yeah, 2 or 3 times. I think it might actually be 3 times.
So like it keeps going and going. And the story's got a lot of flashbacks as well. So it's going to play out there. It's going to play out very differently. I think they're going to take in some of the feedback that they got from the video game and use it to their benefit to make the TV show an improvement in certain areas. My hope is they cast someone awesome as Abby, who can get the audience to ultimately be rooting for her. Did you read that thing I sent you yesterday? I sent both of you like in the middle of the night. It was an article of Succession, talking with Kieran Culkin, and it's talking about endings, and somehow he starts talking about The Last of Us Part 2 without giving away that it's The Last of Us Part 2, and I immediately like knew that it was.
I didn't get a chance to read the article. Yeah.
I forget where I was going with this, but ultimately it goes with like his sympathies ended up lying with Abby by the end. It's going to come down to who you cast. Like that's going to play a major part in how much people ultimately like Abby, because her introduction in the game is going to, or in the television show, is going to make you hate Abby. Have we said yet what Abby does?
No.
Or who Abby is?
We've allowed people plenty of time to get out.
Yeah.
So you go for it.
All right. Abby is the daughter of the doctor who Joel shoots in the head in the end of The Last of Us Part 1. And her introduction in the video game of The Last of Us Part 2 is, which, without knowing yet who she is her getting revenge on her dad's death and ultimately killing Joel in front of Ellie's eyes in a brutal fashion. It's Negan killing Glenn in Walking Dead fashion. That's what I was alluding to earlier. And it's going to turn certain audiences off. Because that was the moment where you look at The Walking Dead's ratings rising. Negan killing Glenn with a barbed wire baseball bat. The decline begins. I think you're going to be dealing with something like that. It's unavoidable with Pedro Pascal dying. I don't know if you feel the same way, or if there's a way to get past that.
I don't think there's a way to get past it. I think the only way that you kind of, soften the blow is the worst way to put it, but I guess that's what I'm going to use, is trying to have it happen as close as possible to the end of the next season. But again, we've discussed this. I don't know how unless they create a lot of more original content, I don't know how they're going to be able to achieve that. But that also will make it worse because you're spending more and more time with this character.
Yeah. The video game is very much built around Ellie's desire for revenge.
Yes.
And particularly Joel's death. It was such a big thing that the trailers of the video game were misleading as hell. They altered scenes from the game so you wouldn't have any idea that Joel was going to die. After the fact, it's hilarious because it's so obvious that he's the one who's dying.
It's very MCU, like Endgame.
Yeah, and I mean, I respect the fact of trying to keep a secret. It sucked at the fact that the game leaked, a week before it came out.
It was more than that, yeah.
Thankfully,
yeah,
we avoided the spoilers, or at least I avoided the spoilers. Did you both avoid them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I avoided it.
Yeah.
So one additional thing I'll say is if they somehow come up with a way to, have that moment be at the end of the season, it's going to make that moment even more emotional. Because at this point, what people want is more Ellie and Joel, more of Pedro Pascal. So
yeah, they're gonna have. I don't see. I think they also
need. I think they also need to realize that Ellie's the protagonist, which I think the show did
the show did a good job.
The show did a pretty good job doing.
Yeah. Throwing you in that direction or pulling you in that direction, rather.
Because you're not playing as Joel the way you are in the video game.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a two-hander. Sure, you start the game out seeing Joel more than you see Ellie, but I mean, honestly, the TV show started in Sarah's POV, just like the video game starts with you playing as Sarah. But yeah, I think he needs to die within 2 hours. If I'm HBO or if I'm them, I do a 2-hour premiere and Joel's dead at the end of 2 hours, and you have your fucking band.
Yeah.
What the fuck do I have coming up next after this type of opening?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I would get on board with that too.
I think so as well. I think the secret to keeping audiences on board is you just cast Jenna Ortega as Abby, and you've got the.
She's way too small. There's no way.
They could no.
She's so hot right now. You just gotta
cast Jenna Ortega in Abby flashbacks. There you go.
Oh my god!
No, she is not.
But if you could have
Abby.
I don't think she would even be.
They could do CGI or. But yeah, I mean, they could cast somebody as Abby that has star power and likability. Although I guess
you're also supposed to not like her
first. So
yeah,
mm-hmm.
we both had things that just jinxed her at that moment.
I don't know. I think they have to go. They have to go with an unknown. I don't think they can go with someone with star power.
Well, there's somebody that they all follow on social media that looks very much the part, who people have been speculating.
The Yellow Jackets person.
Was it Yellow Jackets or the Wilds?
No, it's neither. It's something else.
Abby.
How the fuck do people come up with this? How do they figure out this shit?
Shannon Barry from the Wilds.
Oh, the Wild. Okay, you're right.
But yeah, she very much looks the part.
What's her name again?
Shannon Barry. And Neil Druckmann follows her on Instagram. So there's been people speculating that she's going to be cast as Abby.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
But yeah, I mean, she's somebody who you ultimately have to hate and then learn to. I mean, if you don't love her, at least understand why she does what she does and respect her decision making. I mean, she ultimately does more hero things in the game than Ellie does. Ellie's just on a mission of revenge. Ellie's Joel in fucking like her type of attitude. Like they're two sides of the same coin as characters, which season 1 did a good job of portraying. She has that dark heart or whatever that David was saying in the second to last episode. Granted, she's not completely bad. Everyone is shades of gray in this game and on this show for the most part, and it doesn't exclude.
The end of the game. So I did read that article now that I'm like thinking about it. So he was talking about the end of the game and how like, you know, the where you're like just like having this knockdown drag
out fight.
You're just like this brutal fight between Ellie and Abby on the beach. And I did get to the point where I was just like, I don't really want to like beat the shit out of Abby right now.
But, but you have to.
You have to. But like there were so many times where I tried to just not hit the button and see if it would like let me like out. And it's just like, nope, you got to do it. And so you're like, all right, like here we go, just to kind of move forward. So yeah, I mean, it just they do like, I guess that is sympathizing for this person that you want to kill for the majority of the time, that you don't want to. But part of it is you also see how much Ellie's giving up.
Yes.
By like holding this grudge, and you're kind of just like, I don't know that it was so much sympathizing with Abby as it is like, you know, you just want like Ellie to move on.
Exactly.
I personally got so angry at Ellie.
Yeah, I remember you were like,
I was furious.
You like decisions. I always understood why she was doing what she was doing. Similar to me pardoning Joel. I'm very much I understand the need for closure. Never fucking had to murder anyone because of situations, but I can get why the character was doing what the character was doing.
Yeah.
So don't piss off Murph is basically what I heard.
Don't kill anyone I love, because I'm gonna have a hard time getting over it. But yeah, no, I was never angry at Ellie, so I think I was supposed to, and I think that has more to do with my personality than the writer's fault or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, the game, it gives you choice to it, like only so much choice do you actually have, because it ultimately wants you to get to the end of the story that they want to tell. It's different than like Grand Theft Auto, which will like give you some options to finish the game, or plenty of other video games. But in this one, like you need to do what they want you to do, even if you don't want to do it. And it's very similar to the end of The Last of Us Part 1. You might not, like as a gamer, you might not have wanted to get revenge or not get revenge, but save Ellie, and kill all these people and doom the world. But you got to do it because it's what the story tells you got to do. Last of Us Part 2 deals with it in its own way, which is the fight between Ellie and Abby. What Kieran Culkin said, which I disagreed with, was I understand why she ultimately changed her mind, and it's via that last flashback, or one of those last flashbacks with her and Joel, where she realizes like I shouldn't do this, and that she shouldn't hold on to things for so long, because so much of even before it comes on to her holding on to hate with Abby, she's holding on to hate with Joel, because of the lie that she eventually figures out and definitively was a lie. And she's just so fucking angry because she held on to hate for so long and wasn't dealing with the relationship she could have continued with Joel, and then it got taken away with her right after for somewhat forgiving him, or at least accepting the fact that she maybe one day could forgive him, and then never gets that chance. Like, I get why she does what she does.
I mean, I think some of it was like she was angry with herself for wasting all that time that she could have had with Joel.
Which is a good story. It's like, I don't know. It's a good thing to teach people. Don't hold on to grudges. Like, figure out a way to find peace. You only live for so long. You don't know what's going to happen the next day. Stupid to be angry all the time. Look at me. I just went from being so dark to so positive.
You completely turned around.
Thank you, Neil Druckmann.
Yeah. But
who would have thought? There's some positiveness, positive themes, out of that game.
There is. Like, the game ultimately ends on a positive note, I would say. More of a positive one than the first one. I mean, ultimately, both your protagonists are still alive. Yes, Ellie's lost her love. If there's a part 3, who knows? Maybe she can get her back. She lost her finger
and her guitar.
She can't play
guitar playing fingers.
She lost her. Yeah, she can't play guitar anymore. That sucks. But Abby's still
which is
alive.
Another blow for like the Joel taught her how to do. Like, she can't do anymore. Like it's kind of like fucking. She's gonna have to learn how to play like with the other hand, I guess.
Yeah, she could, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of their big bonding moments, which they started setting up in the season 1 of the TV show.
And Bella Ramsey's actually a singer-songwriter. She has videos online of her playing acoustic guitar and singing. So also makes sense why they casted her. Because she did this stuff years ago.
You bring up a great point, which we haven't talked about. Why is the internet so stupid? Why the fuck did they think they were going to recast Bella Ramsey in season 2?
I don't know. Well, I can kind of.
I mean, the internet is full of dumb people. There's no doubt about that.
The only thing I could understand is that the age up of Ellie is pretty significant.
Yes,
but they aged her down. Like,
she's a 19-year-old in real life.
No, I know. Yeah, I think people didn't think that Bella Ramsey is as old as she is.
If that's it, all right, then I can tolerate that.
Because they do a lot of things in season 1 of the show to make her look a lot younger. Yes. Like, so maybe that's why, and people are just,
like, by the time they're shooting season 2 or shooting seasons 2 and 3, she's gonna be way older than 19.
Yeah.
She's probably gonna be 21 or 22 by the time she's filming season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll be playing a 19-year-old.
Yep. Yeah, I think people just didn't look into the details because I was puzzled by that too. But I was like, wait, well, she does look really young. Maybe
because we didn't talk about the fact that part 2 takes place 5 years later.
Yeah, I didn't understand the notion of recasting her. Period. So,
yeah. Like how often do you see characters recast? Did they watch House of the Dragons and they just they decided that was the norm, that characters get recast all the time?
Yeah,
because that's like a rare thing.
I feel like that was coming more from the video game community too, and not from people that haven't played the game, like just fans of the show.
Yes, because people who didn't play the game wouldn't have any idea.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think they just there's a group that's not happy with the casting of Bella Ramsey because she's not the Ellie that they know, and they were hoping that that there's a chance for recasting, and they get an actress of their choice is probably
there's a lot of
seeing there.
There's a lot of complaining out there with the show from people that we're friends with too. So
really,
mm-hmm.
Dox them. Who are they?
I mean, Ryan.
Just out them right here, right now on the show.
We need to hear
names and addresses.
Who are we friends with that are not fans of this character?
Ryan and John, but I don't agree with how they feel. Their frustration is more because the show wasn't long enough, and there were elements of the game that suffered because of it.
Well, they have to understand, Elliot Page is a man now, so they couldn't have gotten the casting that was basically.
Oh, the casting they were fine with Bella Ramsey. They were fine with that. It's other things, and more specifically, the way they handled the finale. They didn't like.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk more offline.
Yeah, but which is valid. Like, it goes back to
everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and they did do it very differently than the game, so I can understand people.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. I find it interesting that this story continues to, bring up arguments with its viewers. It did it with the video game in different ways, and now it's doing it again in the same ways, but then also different ways because it's a different medium entirely. I just find that fascinating, and I cannot wait for part 2 because that's going to be
so mad.
Insane.
Do you think like Druckmann's got to be so nervous about having to do like part 2 and like
he's probably like, great, I'm gonna have to deal with death threats all over again.
Yeah, I don't know if he's nervous because I don't think anything could have gotten worse than having the video game community at odds and against you for what he did, and for 2.
For telling the story.
They're going to get fired up all over again.
Yeah, exactly. It's his story. Ultimately.
It's his fucking story. It's not your story. You get to play the story that he gives you. Be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Sorry that you're not getting your fan fiction. Write it if you want it. And it's your story. Fuck, man. He didn't tell everything I wanted him to tell, too. But I didn't fucking get up in arms and start freaking out about it.
Well, because you have some sense. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess
so.
That has something to do with it.
I imagine that's gonna happen again, but I don't know if it'll be worse. It'll be different. And I also ultimately feel like people that watch TV shows and movies for the most part are a little bit more accepting of
they
things.
They are. You're right about that.
They like the drama,
things a lot better than the
and the tragedy. It's like a drug. Like, they're like, yeah, that's upsetting, but I love the experience. I get it. I get what they're going.
Like we've said, they will make changes, likely based on certain bits of feedback, and likely to make it flow better as a TV show. But man, yeah, it's still gonna piss off people. And like I said, you gotta kill Joel fucking fast. You got it. It's the whole story is based around him dying.
Yeah, you got me on board with that pitch. I would agree.
And he's a specter throughout. He is a major presence throughout the entire game, despite being dead.
Right.
Because the whole game revolves around his death, and there's plenty of flashbacks through it. They can always add more flashbacks.
Yeah, it's true. You sold me.
You don't want to add too many though, where it's like, he's basically still here.
Agreed. You overdo it, that's a problem in itself. Honestly, I was fine with the amount they did at the video game. And what do you have? 3 or 4?
I feel like it was more.
Felt like it was a bunch.
I felt like it was more than that, but it's been such a long time since I played through the whole game.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's probably around 5 or 6.
It's just such a meaty experience. I don't know. That's daunting. I think that's more daunting than adapting the first season.
Hell yeah.
More complicated, sure. More daunting.
I don't envy them at all. I would have thought Craig Mazin would have played part 2 and be like, never mind, I don't want to adapt this video game anymore.
Yeah, no, he's a huge fan. Huge fan of the entire series. So, I think he chased to get on board. But I don't know. I'm sure they have it all planned out already to an extent. So,
And I think I'm alone in this, but there's still part of me that wishes The Last of Us was just one game and done, because I thought the ending of 1 was like perfect, and 2, while still great in its own ways, doesn't wrap up as nicely as part 1 does.
no, it definitely doesn't.
It doesn't have as clear a story as part 1. I don't know. I'm still conflicted in my own way about part 2.
I think the reason why they did that is because they really wanted to keep it open so they could do a third game. Whereas with Last of Us Part 1, when that came out, it was just The Last of Us. There was no intention of making a second game originally at all.
Yeah.
I don't know when that ultimately changed, but when they made that game, that was going to be one and done, and they were going to move on to another Uncharted game.
And that's what Druckmann said even about part 2, is like making them one at a time, like they're intended to wrap up the series each time. If he never makes the third one, he's happy with how to ended the series. I don't see it as much as like.
I think he's lying through his face. I think he ultimately has a part 3. He's just not saying it, and he's said it in more ways than one in different interviews. I don't believe that. I think that's just a lie.
Yeah, I don't know. What's the gain from lying now? Like,
I think because he probably ultimately, if he decides not to do it, then he's never announced it, because game developments are so long. If they end up like going into development, like pre-production with the game, and then like what they have doesn't work and it's not up to the same level of quality as part 2, ultimately I wouldn't do it, because it's just going to end up ruining the legacy. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on part 1 versus part 2 as games?
As games, part 2 is, I think, way better, but like from a story perspective, it's hard because part 2 is so different. It's like so multi-layered, and the things that they do in that game are things that they've never done in video games before, like storytelling wise, like getting you to hate a character and then ultimately end up liking her by the end, based on how you're being told to play as her, and that story that's being told that's never been done before. So I respect it for that, but overall, I don't know. I think I might prefer the story of 1 more, but the experience from 2 was just like very unique.
Doug?
Yeah, I mean, 2's more ambitious. The graphics are obviously improved. The gameplay's
better.
Gotten better.
Yeah, definitely.
So
that's a natural thing to happen.
Yeah, so they've made improvements just for the fact that it came out 7 years later than the first one. But yeah, I mean, story wise, for me, like the first part 1 just like gets in and out. Like it's got like a really good flow to it, where it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. Whereas there definitely are parts in part 2 where it does start to feel like it's like kind of starting to drag a little bit at points.
Mm-hmm.
There are points where it does kind of feel like almost bloated. So I think like if I had to pick one, I would pick the first one over the 2. It's just like a better. It's like I said, it's just kind of like the right length.
Yeah,
well, it tells
the first one is like
no
a 20
or anything to it.
The first one's like a 21-hour game, I think. That might even be too long, and the second one is like almost 40 hours.
I'm seeing 14 hours for part 1 and 24 hours for part 2 online. If you just like are doing the story and like not like doing anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I
First
think
one feels
that's-
fairly quick. I've played the first one twice. I'll be playing it again later this year. Part 2 did feel longer though than the 24 hours that I just mentioned. I thought it was longer than 24 hours, but online. It says it on average it's 24 hours. But it most definitely will require 2 seasons at least.
And it's one of those PS4 games that is 2 discs.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yep, you are correct.
We need to get it. I wonder when we're going to get a remaster of that.
That's when I'll play it next.
I
am excited
remastering everything.
I am excited to eventually play it again, but I will hold off until the remaster to play part 2 again.
That'll probably come out in time for the season 2.
Yeah.
For HBO.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're smart. They'll time it.
Yeah.
I mean, what did they put out? Part 1, the remake, 4 months before season 1.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're smart, they'll have it out by the end of this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's selling on PS4.
Well, there's a Last of Us massive multiplayer game that apparently they're announcing this year. So that'll be Sony's next Last of Us game. Whatever that is.
Yeah, but I'm surprised they didn't remaster part 2 yet, just because the scarcity of games on PS5, and they remastered The Last of Us almost immediately on PS4.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came out in 2014, and The Last of Us came out in 2013, and PS4 came out in 2013 as well.
Yeah.
Similar to Last of Us Part 2, both of those games came out 6 months before the end of their consoles, generation before their subsequent system came out.
I think they released some sort of major fix stuff for PS5. It runs better, looks better, that kind of thing, but nothing remaster level.
Gotcha. Yeah, and they've put out the Uncharted ones already as remasters, the PS4 Uncharted games.
Mm-hmm.
I am surprised they haven't done it yet for part 2, but it'll only be a matter of time.
Yep.
All right, but yeah, yes, I was in agreement. I prefer part 1, but I think part 2 is still a very, very damn good game. It's a great game. It's just it's not the story I was expecting, nor anyone else was expecting, and I'm interested to see how they tweak it to make it even better on television. Because while I don't think the TV show of part 1 was better than the game, I think it was a perfect companion piece to it. And my hope is, at the very least, that part 2 is a TV show is a perfect companion piece, if not even better on that medium than the video game, which I think is possible.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Definitely.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think we covered it all for now.
All right.
If you haven't played the games, go play them if you have a PS5.
Yeah.
Well, they probably
even
have
if you they would have left.
Give a shit about spoilers because we
Play the
covered
game. Play the game again.
You could even play them on PS4 if you don't have a PS5
or PC.
They're both available.
Well, the first one's on PC. Actually, don't play that port. I heard it's terrible. Right now.
So stick with PS4 or PS5. But yeah, that's all we've got for today. Thank you again for listening.
Can we take the spoiler warning off? Not that
the last 30 seconds matters, but thanks, Doug.
Matters.
But yes, thanks again for listening. That's all we've got. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Follow us on podcast networks or whatever the fuck you want to do. YouTube. But as always, this has been Corey. I had to look at our names again. This has been Corey, Doug, and Murph at Live Breathe Film. We'll see you again next time, film fans.
Bye.